Hello Whisky fans, welcome back. Got another cheapie to review today. This is Distiller's Choice Blended Malt Scotch Whisky. It's a 5-year-old. It's 40% ABV, it's almost certainly probably chill filtered, and it's probably coloured as well. But it's £15. Reading from the back label, we know that this is aged for a minimum of 5 years. Each whisky is expertly selected for its unique taste. The chosen aged malts are then left to marry for up to, and marry is in inverted commas like it's a made-up word, for up to 3 months in American oak bourbon barrels to let the lighter honey flavours of Speyside and the rich full-bodied Highland malt whiskies fuse together to create a match you can't help but fall in love with. And then it says try it with rich dark chocolate or freshly brewed coffee. Yeah, okay. What I will say is that early batches of this on the label and on the website, they said that it was married in sherry barrels. So something has changed with this one. It used to be a mix of Highland and Speyside married in sherry. It's now a mix of Highland and Speyside malts married in bourbon barrels. So there's a good chance this is going to be noticeably different to older bottlings if you've had this before. I actually haven't. This is the first time I've tried this. But be aware they have probably at least slightly rejigged the recipe on this one. Also need to mention that this is an exclusive to Morrisons Supermarket because it's specially selected, is their terminology, for Morrisons Supermarket. So you're not going to be able to get this anywhere else in all likelihood. Now, I have to mention the mention that I got from the big man himself, Ralphie Mitchell. I made a comment on one of his videos and I was talking about how it's not an ethical move to purchase your whiskey from supermarkets, and I still stand by that, especially when you're talking about the official bottling stuff. Most of the supermarkets, they are not ethical. It's almost comical how a lot of them talk about fair trade and things like that when they regularly crap on their suppliers. And I do still stand by all of those comments, but I think if you're on a tight budget and you're looking for a really good value, affordable whiskey, then I think that often the supermarket exclusive blended malts just can't be beat. One thing that does intrigue me about this one is the mention of marrying on the back label. That's probably not the sort of thing that a supermarket is just going to pick up on by themselves. And the term marrying is quite often one used by, not exclusively by, but something that Edrington Group go on and on about. They've mentioned that they marry their whiskies for things like the Famous Grouse, and Highland Park whiskies often state that there's a marrying period after maturation in which all the components of the vatting have time to settle down and marry and sort of harmonise. So it does make me wonder, the fact that they've specified that this whiskey is married for up to 3 months on the label of this one. Is that something that they've been fed from the supplier? And is that supplier Edrington? It's quite possible, but we don't know. The main thing is that we know that this is a Morrisons product selected by them. So if you want a bottle, that's where you've got to go. So let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. Screw top, which is probably what you'd expect for £15. At least it's in a glass bottle though. I don't know if you still get whiskey in plastic bottles. Probably 10-15 years ago, for the really, really cheap stuff, sometimes supermarkets would actually use plastic bottles, and quite often you wouldn't notice until you got home and you'd be holding the bottle and you'd feel it flex slightly. And that's just when you know that all corners have been cut. There's just been no production value into that whiskey at all. Hopefully this one's going to be a little bit better than those old shockers that you used to get. So, Morrisons Distiller's Choice on the nose. So we know that this one is a blended malt of Speyside and Highland malts, and I think that on the nose those Speyside malts really, really dominate. It's all very Speyside driven, smells a lot like a decent Speyside single malt. So getting lots of orchard fruit notes, sweet green apple, a little bit of gooseberry in there, creamy honeyed malt. There's a strong sweet maltiness on the nose of this one. I am detecting a slight touch of gently peated malt and a little bit of orangey sherry. So that's a really good nose. I think it's the sort of nose that you can probably expect from your better put together blended malts. Me personally, I think that if you're looking for something in the affordable price bracket, you're almost always better off looking at an affordable blended malt compared to the more premium blended Scotch. Just my opinion, but I think that the blended malts quite often offer better value and you just get a better whiskey at the lower price points. As it is, this is a very feature-filled and very characterful, flavour-packed, very nice Speyside nose. Let's see how it tastes. Pretty dark on the colour. I'm going to back up my statement that almost certainly is a coloured whiskey. I think that you'd have to put a lot of sherry or perhaps wine casks or virgin oak to get a 5-year-old whiskey to be that dark. But it's kind of par for the course. It's what you expect for £15. As for the palate, I don't think that it quite keeps up with the nose. Very, very impressed with the nose on this one. Very complex, lots of pretty strong flavours, really nice experience. The palate on this one is that little bit simple and a little bit thin, which is probably has a lot to do with the fact that this is a minimum strength 40% whiskey, but there are nice flavours there to be had. Getting some nice notes of strawberry, a little bit of slightly burnt malted barley, along with some nice notes of toasted grains, slightly bitter oakiness. Going to have another sip. I think that the palate on this one, whereas that nose is so stereotypically Speyside, the palate is more sort of typically Highland in its flavour profile. And that's not a bad thing, but I think that the palate on this one compared to the nose, it is that slightly bit thin, but still very decent. As for the finish on this one, getting lots of sweet lingering maltiness, some of those faint Speyside orchard fruit notes starting to come back on the late palate. It's a little bit short and a little bit bitter, but all in all, not too bad. As for a grade for this one, it's obviously, you can probably tell from my tasting notes already, I think that it's a really good value little blended malt. I'm going to give it a B-, which is the same grade that I gave to the Lidl's Glenorchy 5-year-old blended malt. I have to be clear, this is not the same stuff. They're definitely not using the same supplier. It's quite a different flavour profile. I think that the Glenorchy, which last time I tried it was still a fantastic value, really nice little blended malt. It's much more spirit forward, it's much sharper, much fruitier. Whereas this is a much more rounded, probably more traditional flavour profile, more traditional to what the average person thinks of when they just think of the stereotypical blended malt. But I really do think that this is an excellent value bottling, and it beats just about every lower price blend on the market, even some which are much, much more expensive. And I think it's a great introduction to what whiskey is and what whiskey can be, that actually has flavours that can be picked out. When you look at a lot of even some of the more premium blended whiskies, they're really quite a barren experience. There's not a lot of flavour to pick out. Whereas with this one, because it's a blended malt, it just has that much more character and more definable flavours without having anything too extreme or too scary for anyone that's a bit new to whiskey. I also think that this one makes an excellent budget-priced casual sipper for anyone that wants something to share with friends or guests, or just something to sort of put in front of the expensive stuff so you don't go through the fancy stuff too quickly. Compared to other kind of bottle-shelved whiskey in a similar price range to this, I mean, if you compare this to something like White and Mackay, this has just got so much more flavour, it's so much more mature, it's such a better quality experience. This really gives you an idea of how great whiskey can be. And then if you compare this to something sort of like at the top end of the sort of the entry level price bracket, something like Bimber Apogee, the quality of this, even though the ABV is lower, is not that much lower. It really offers a reasonably similar experience to those premium blends, but at a much, much lower price. So I really think that they've hit the sweet spot with this one. It's a really attractive middle ground, and I think, as I said, because it's a blended malt, it has that perfect balance between high quality and complexity and being really economical. So if you've had this one, let me know what you think. If you've had the previous version that stated that it was married in sherry barrels and you've had this new recipe, has it changed? What do you think about that? And what are your thoughts on where this whiskey is made? Thanks for watching, and cheers.